The RPG genre is perhaps one of the most popular in gaming, with a near-endless array of worlds to discover, new gameplay mechanics to unlock, and secrets to experience. It's not without its hang-ups, especially with certain repeated tropes and clichés that can get on your nerves. Here are some things we can't stand in role-playing games. Level scaling enemies. There's something to be said about games like Last Epoch and Diablo 4, where you become stronger and out-level everything in a zone, with the end game offering unique challenges. It's invigorating and lends to the power fantasy that those games convey. Then you have the likes of Fallout 4 and The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, where you become stronger, but everything scales with you. It keeps up the challenge, but diminishes all those upgrades and powerful weapons at times. Though it depends on the RPG subgenre, an option to turn it on or off, like in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, would be nice. Bosses with too much HP. Bosses usually have a lot of health. It's just the nature of some role-playing games. However, when it starts crossing into the tens of millions, things get awkward. One of the big complaints when The Division first rolled around was the abundance of bullet sponge enemies, who just had too much health and damage resistance, which felt weird given its more grounded nature and facilitated balance changes. Dealing tons of damage feels great, but like the whole level scaling, if a boss can tank it all, what is the point? Bosses with too many phases. On a similar note are multi-phase bosses. Again, having an additional phase or two isn't bad. Some of the best bosses from Dark Souls 3, or the many bosses from the Souls genre, have multiple phases. However, sometimes a role-playing game goes way further beyond, with multiple different phases that are simply not fun. It's time-consuming and wearisome. Grinding. As much as I can enjoy Monster Hunter World, and sometimes Rise, the grind for materials and rare drops can become tedious. Yes, the grind is ultimately one of the main factors of such games, and it can get much worse in titles like Diablo 4, with its awful drop rate. Nevertheless, it's annoying, especially when it feels like you're wasting your time for nothing. Grinding for perfect rolls. Even if you enjoy grinding in an action RPG, RNG seemingly never works out in your favor. If it's not having specific suffixes and prefixes, it's the lack of Tier 1 stats, despite all the sunk currency and grinding. Sure, it's more the domain of min-maxers, and the thrill is in the chase, but it's still annoying. Near-mandatory side quests. Have you ever enjoyed the main quest of a campaign, only to find that you're under-leveled for the next bit? How about being told to come back later for a specific bit? Time to do some side quests and level up, raise your gear score or craft better armor. Several games are guilty of this, from Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. While you don't have to do them, the game compels you in the least subtle ways. Material farming and gathering. Of course, another type of grind in role-playing games involves, you guessed it, farming for materials. Take Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League for instance. Before a patch for Raising Hell, you had to get Promethium to access the endgame Elseworlds missions by hunting down Cargonauts or completing Metropolis missions. It didn't seem so bad initially, but the tedium eventually became too much. Don't even get us started on the Skull and Bones endgame experience. Running out of currency or materials. Even worse than grinding out materials and currency is suddenly running out. Suicide Squad and Skull and Bones are primary examples of this, but it also affects hunting titles. There's nothing quite like having to upgrade something in Grand Blue Fantasy Relink only to find you're short of rupees, crafting materials or something else, and thus have to trade for it or load up the specific missions to farm more. Multiply that with multiple characters for maximum pain. Poor returns when selling expensive items. Acquiring an Infinity +1 sword and then selling it off to get less than a reasonable amount of money is another annoyance. You could justify it with some vendors simply not realizing the value of the items, or not having enough gold, as can sometimes happen in Baldur's Gate 3. Nevertheless, it can break the immersion at times. Annoying NPCs. Non-playable characters come in all flavors, which means a fair few annoyances here and there. They could range from NPCs roaming the streets and blocking your way to potential companions like Preston Garvey from Fallout 4, whose very existence is an irritation of the highest magnitude. Let's not forget about the vendors either. When was the last time you brought me anything nice, sir? Limited carrying capacity and encumbrance. Is it reasonable to expect an average person to carry hundreds of pounds of stuff and go on like it's nothing? Probably not. Is limited carrying capacity and encumbrance still annoying from a gameplay perspective? Absolutely. You could argue the realism and mechanics it imparts in survival games, but it feels terrible in most role-playing games, especially with so much loot, items, and resources to gather. Party members turning hostile. So, you made a decision that's annoyed a fellow party member. That's fine. Not everyone will agree with everything, but then they turn hostile or leave. On the one hand, it's a major headache if you invest in their settings, but on the other, it adds weight to your interactions and decisions. It's a toss-up overall. Your choices mean nothing. The flip side, however, is when your choices mean absolutely nothing. It doesn't matter which response you choose, the result is ultimately the same. Too many titles do this to bother listing them all, but the worst is those that claim your decisions have an impact and don't even really affect the ending. Less or no party control. I understand players who prefer being more hands-off with their party members and letting the game handle them. Granblue Fantasy Relink is a good example, and though they coordinate decently, having limited orders and no character switching feels restrictive. Simple fetch quests in narrative-focused games. There's something about partaking in an epic quest, whether you're sailing the high seas, trying to save Metropolis, or venturing through space and having to complete mundane fetch quests. While they could serve as bounties for quick tasks to earn XP, they can also serve as a major buzzkill when integrated into the narrative, which should focus more on the characters and the plot. And when they end. Despite all the potential annoyances and nagging problems one may have with a role-playing game, there's no denying that the biggest is when they end. After pouring dozens of hours into them, getting to know and love the characters, and experiencing so much, it's hard to say goodbye, even if everything wraps up nicely. Some games get around this by having epilogues or endgame content, while others feature a seasonal model with new activities. So what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.